Now, the former commissioner of New York about the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks, the man who was fighting with an Atlanta officer, struggled, apparently seized the officer's taser, was running away. The officer pursued him on foot, and Brooks turns around, points the taser, and then he's shot twice. Here's what the former commissioner of New York said about this.
When you take a police officer's weapon and you attempt to destabilize him or to incapacitate him, especially with a taser, if you hit a cop with a taser, it's going to knock him down. It's going to put him in a position where he can't respond, and he has a sidearm on. So he has two choices. He could let you hit him with that taser, and the possibility is then you go to get his gun, or he could take you down. And in this case, I'm sure that's what the officer did. But you know what, Steve? We shouldn't be talking about this. This should be a grand jury. This should be a real investigation. All this stuff that everybody's speculating right now, that's what investigations are for.
Now, so-called unarmed assailant, that is people without a knife or a gun, kill more than 3,000 people every year. And getting back to this study I mentioned, quote, a detailed review of circumstances surrounding all law enforcement officer deaths in 2015 revealed that 11% of law enforcement officers murdered in the line of duty from 2013 to 2015 were killed by somebody the Washington Post would label as unarmed. In 5% of officer deaths, the officer was beaten to death. Another 6%, the assailant grabbed the officer's gun and shot the officer. To compare, 11% of officers murdered in the line of duty were killed by somebody who was unarmed, and only 9.3% of those killed by the police were allegedly unarmed. Quote, in summary, the data reveal that unarmed assailants kill many police officers and thousands of private citizens every year. Nevertheless, the data reveal that law enforcement officers shoot and kill unarmed assailants at lower proportions than officers themselves are killed by unarmed assailants. It also talks about how much more likely a black person is to kill a police officer than the other way around. Heather McDonald said a cop is 18.5 times more likely to be shot by a black person than a cop is to shoot an unarmed black person. By the way, 25% of those killed by the police use of force were blacks. In recent Washington Post tally of about 1,000 a year. However, 33% of law enforcement officers were murdered in the line of duty were killed by blacks. 25% of those killed by police were black. 33% of cops killed in the line of duty were killed by blacks. Quote, it appears that African-American men are less likely to be killed than their violence towards the police would suggest. End of quote. The data are just not there. Now, one of the things that the protesters want is for the police department to be diversified to look like the community. Is there any evidence that changing the racial makeup of cops would change the outcome in the streets? The answer is no. First of all, many of our police departments are pretty well diverse. Quote, in most recent estimates from the U.S. DOJ from 2010, and it's a lot more now, that's 10 years ago, there were 12.2% of law enforcement officers who were black, 11.6% Hispanic, 3.5% other non-white races. So that means the police pretty much reflect the percentage of blacks in the country. And then there were examinations of departments to find out whether or not the racial diversity had any impact on deaths. One study by Brad Smith, Wayne State. Another study by sociologists of California State. Another one, University of New Mexico. Quote, racial diversity of the department had no influence on the rate at which police officers were assaulted or murdered. The only thing that really mattered was the rate of violent crime. Criminologists from Seattle University, University of Texas, quote, studied a nationwide sample of 496 law enforcement agencies and found that the racial diversity of the department had no influence on the number of excessive force complaints that were filed by citizens. The study was replicated by another study from another team, University of Pennsylvania, involving officer shootings. Diversity of the police force had no effect whatsoever on officer uses of force. Quote. Conclusion. While it is unknown how many police-citizen contacts occur every year, there are estimates that there are over 300 million. This means police pretty much handle almost a service call for every man, woman, and child in this country. And this doesn't include proactive stops, informal citizen contacts. You add that, you double the figure. So there's at least a contact with the police for every man, woman, and child in this country. You look at that, out of that over 300 million police-citizen contacts, there are some 11 million arrest charges, 48,000 officers assaulted, 990 citizens killed. Over 300 million police contacts, 11 million arrest charges, nearly 50,000 officers assaulted, yet 990 citizens are killed. Substantially lower than in years past. The data just do not support the argument that the police are out to get blacks. If anything, the data show that the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger against a black suspect. Let's get back to the attorney for Rayshard Brooks, the man who was shot and killed by the Atlanta police.
So we agree with the mayor saying that the officer that fired that fired his weapon should be terminated.
Speaking of the mayor, Atlanta mayor is black. The Atlanta police chief, the one who just resigned, gay female. Diverse department. Many of the people running the city of Atlanta, black. I thought the point behind getting people of color in positions of responsibility was so that when something went down, there would at least be a guarantee that it would be fully, thoroughly, and fairly and exhaustively examined. What makes you think these people are not going to do that? Minneapolis, the vice president of the city council is black. Next door mayor St. Paul is black. The AG, state AG is black. The congressperson from that area is Ilhan Omar. What makes you think whatever happened won't be thoroughly investigated? Then why the need to burn buildings down? Why riot? I'm Larry Elder.
All across America, The Larry Elder Show.